right. Hi, everyone. Good evening or good morning, based on your time zones. I see people are logging in. I have Tomer Sharon here with me today. I'm going to say a couple of welcome words and then hand over the stage to him. So first things first, thanks a lot for everyone for joining. We have like a super number of registrants and participants today, and I'm very glad so many of you came for Tomer as well as this topic, continuous research. A bit of background about Airtime in a couple of sentences. My name is Akosh. I'm the CEO of Airtime. Airtime is a real-time research engagement platform, and we enable product teams to validate problems, feature ideas, and changes with users within a couple of days, so they can make validation an inherent part of every product sprint. In brackets, we're in closed beta. We have 9 more spots left. If you're curious to hear about that, put beta in the chat or click on the link that I will post in a second. So much about Airtime because you came here most likely for Tomer and then to hear him. Tomer joins us today to share his experience and ideas about user research, continuous user research. He is a repository of practical tips and wisdom in the area. And I wish all of you happy listening to his presentation and take your chance to ask questions at the end of the session when the Q&A comes. So Tomer, without further ado, pleasure to have you here, and please take it away.
Thank you, Akosh. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, and thank you everyone for joining on this, well, either morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. Please use the chat to ask questions. Akosh, if you see something burning, then let me know. If I'm saying something and a lot of people are saying they're asking about it, then stop me, no problem at all. Otherwise, I'll answer everything or as much as I can in the end. And also, before I start, I will share the link to this deck in the end. So no need to screen capture or anything like that, or work hard on your notes. Everything will be yours. All right, let's jump right in. And this is I call this talk continuous research in 11.6 seconds. It's because of this slide that I found several years ago. So I would bet it's faster now. Amazon.com deploys code to its website once every 11.6 seconds. And that made me think and also say, and I'll repeat that towards the end as well, that a research answer or an answer to a research question can also be given within that time frame if you put your mind to continuous user research. So that's what I'm trying to achieve. Kind of open your minds a little bit about the different way of organizing research, of doing research that can be added to your toolkit. So that's where I'm coming from. What we're going to go over in this kind of about half hour is what I call traditional research, the research you're all familiar with, and its problems, continuous research and its value, lessons learned through implementing continuous research in several workplaces, and getting started. What can you do to get started with continuous user research? All right, so let's start with what everybody knows. Traditional research usually takes the form of these 7 steps to complete. So you first initiate it, you plan it, you recruit participants. Data collection is the actual research itself. You interview, you do usability tests, you do field observation, you do whatever it is that you do. And then you synthesize and analyze and come up with the results. You report them in some way, and you follow up on kind of your recommendations or recommendations other people made to see that your research was impactful. Sounds very familiar, I hope. And just try and put it on a calendar. So this is how a schedule of a relatively productive researcher would look like. And I kind of highlighted the areas where I think different studies are happening. So this is a 3-week study, maybe interviews or observation, and I'm kind of including the times from start to finish, from when you start and initiate it based on the steps until you're reporting the results. This is a shorter study. This might be a usability test, and so on and so forth. Every month, something is happening, obviously linearly, and in each study, the researcher is answering very specific research questions. So when I describe that, people say, "Okay, so what seems to be the problem here? This is how we've been doing things for as long as we can remember." So here's one good thing about it, and I call these dedicated studies to the traditional research form of conducting those studies. Dedicated because they are dedicated to very specific research questions, okay? And therefore, they answer the questions they're designed to answer, and it's all good, okay? The limitations of traditional research or of these dedicated studies is that they will almost never answer questions you didn't know you should ask. And sometimes even the opposite, which is sometimes good, sometimes bad, depending on how you perceive it. Sometimes you're getting a lot more answers than the ones you're interested in. So you're pretty much, you're very overwhelmed sometimes. And what people tend to do when they're overwhelmed, they tend to focus on the questions they agreed on answering through this research study with their team in advance, and put the other answers to questions nobody asked on the side. They might report them someday. They might report them in the end of the report or whatever it is that they use to communicate the results, but they are secondary, sometimes lost. Another limitation is that if there was no previous dedicated study done on a certain topic, there are no answers to questions about it. So if I conducted 65 different studies throughout the year, but none of them was dedicated to the question of how our users are using video, for example, then I, as the researcher, would need to go through the lengthy 7-step process that I described earlier and provide an answer to that question. This is what I call them dedicated. They're dedicated to a topic usually, or several smaller topics, and that's it. And if you need an answer to another question, you need to do the whole thing again and again. And another limitation of traditional research or dedicated studies is that organizations in general have very bad research memory. As an organization, organizations don't remember the results of research. You finish a study, as I showed you earlier, you finish the block of 3 weeks, for example, you write a report, you communicate it to the team. A year after, you're lucky if you're even finding the file with the research results. Not to mention people, take different positions, people leave, people forget, very bad research memory, and we don't have systems to support it, or we didn't until recently. The solution in my mind is not necessarily just continuous research. The solution is a system for, if you will, a system for research or a research system. In my mind, this system includes 3 things. I'm only going to talk about continuous research today. I'm not going to talk about the repository and atomic research, but these are, in my mind, the components of a research system that is solving the problems I just described. So the first one is a research repository, where you store all of your knowledge about users or the knowledge that is coming from the research you conduct. Atomic research is an approach. I'll define everything in a second. An approach to conducting research and storing this data. And continuous research is the topic of our conversation today. So let's go over the things. I really like to define things well before we continue, so everybody are aligned with the same thing. So a repository, and this is not my definition, this is coming from Dovetail, which I like, and I think it's very true. It's a Wikipedia for customer knowledge. Okay, so this is how Dovetail, and I kind of support this definition, define a research repository. When it comes to atomic research, an approach to managing research knowledge that redefines the atomic unit of a research insight. If before atomic research, the research insights were gathered into a report. With atomic research, we're splitting that into singular, if you will, lessons that we learned and insights that we gather. I call them nuggets or a research nugget, and that's a tagged observation supported by evidence. It's just the smallest, and this is why I call it atomic research, the smallest unit of learning or insight that you can gather from research. It's tagged so you can find it later. It's an observation. You report on something that happened or something somebody said. You also describe the why this is happening in your opinion as a researcher, and you provide the evidence. The evidence could be, the best one is video, a short video, but it could also be a picture, a document, or a recording of some sort, whatever it is. And then we are arriving to the topic of the day. Continuous research is fast rhythm research that is open-ended in nature. Okay, so keep that in mind, fast and open-ended, and I'll show you exactly how it works. Here's an example. When I was with WeWork, we made a habit of interviewing every WeWork member, every company that decided to leave WeWork. Technically, at the time, there was a certain time frame from when member companies said we want to leave until they actually left. During that time, my team and I reached out to them and asked we called it the primary member, the person who's making a decision to join or leave WeWork, interviewed them for 15, 20 minutes. And we asked them these 3 questions. Hundreds of interviews, only these 3 questions. Why are you leaving? Not because we're trying to persuade them to come back. We really want to know why they're leaving and learn from it. What worked well at WeWork and what didn't work so well. And a bonus question, if we didn't get good answers to these 3 questions, would be just to encourage them and kind of make them think, if you had 15 minutes with the CEO, what would you tell them? So ask them all these questions, all these people, we asked them only these 3 questions. And I want you to pay attention here to what's going on here. The interviewees, control the conversation. I'm not putting words in their mouth. I'm not interested in a specific feature of WeWork that I want feedback on. It's very high level. They decide what they want to talk about. If they decide to talk about coffee at WeWork sucks, and this is why we're leaving, we can't have it without great coffee, then they chose to talk about coffee. And maybe they chose to talk about coffee over prices that they think are high. Well, maybe coffee is more important to them. So they control the conversation. They decide what they want to talk about it. Not us, not the team, not our stakeholders. Okay, so this is what I mean by open-ended. Okay, it's very fast because it doesn't take a lot of time to get answers to these 3 questions, and we can do a lot of these. Imagine we did this almost every day, sometimes several times a day as a team. This is how it would look like. Very, very productive researcher who's applying continuous user research. They would interview a person for 15 minutes almost every day. Okay, so it's not a dedicated study. There's not necessarily a high-level research question. For example, what do our users think about our coffee? We don't have that. We just have these 3 open-ended questions in this example that I showed you. We just repeat them with different people and collect different answers. I want to show you or tell you a little bit about an example of how this could be useful. So when I'm consuming, imagine there's a system that I can pull out all of these insights from these interviews about WeWork done with members who decided to leave. So let's say, or at the time, sorry, you could only purchase a WeWork desk or office if you went through a tour, physical tour in the building you were interested in, and then you would sign up. And so the tour is one topic here. The other topic is coffee that I mentioned earlier. So let's say you are searching through the system with those insights. You're searching for tour and you're searching later for coffee. And then you see that you have 72 different insights about the tour and 3 about coffee. So it doesn't necessarily mean that tours are more problematic than coffee, but maybe you should focus your attention on the tour rather than coffee. And this is before I even looked at what are those insights. So just to give you an example of how you can use this quantitatively before you even dive into the qualitative understanding of each nugget or each insight coming from your interviews or from your continuous research. We'll talk for a couple of minutes about the value of continuous research. So the first thing is that you have immediate answers to most research questions. I must admit, this was very, very surprising to my team and I, to a point where people came to us sometimes asking for research on a specific topic. We thought to ourselves and said, yeah, that sounds like something we never did research for. Let's just check the system and see if we have any insights coming from our continuous research efforts. And when we did that, almost 100% of the cases, we had answers. Remember when I talked earlier about running 65 dedicated studies, none of them dedicated to video in that example? You would find that even though the 65 studies were not dedicated to video, if you tagged everything you learned about well, then you'll find insights about video. So you have the answers to those questions about topics that you didn't necessarily imagine you had answers to in those systems based on those continuous research interviews. The other thing is quick answers to specific questions. And the trick to do that, if you are doing continuous research every day and asking, let's go with that example that I showed you, asking those 3 questions, you can decide that for 2 weeks, you're adding a 4th question, and it might be very specific. So yes, I'm asking why you're leaving. I'm asking what worked well and what didn't work so well, but I'm also asking you to tell me about your experience with our room booking system, because now we're interested in that. Now we think we want to learn more about that system. So instead of 15 minutes of an interview, it's going to be 20 minutes, and I'm going to gain insights for 2 weeks. I'm going to gain insights about our room booking system. So continuous user research allows you this flexibility without planning a whole big dedicated study that can give you a lot more answers about this example room booking system. But on the other hand, this is relatively shallow. It's only 1 question, but you can gain something. Again, if you do that with a lot of people in a short amount of time, you can gain a lot of very interesting insights using this technique. And the third value is that you get increased buy-in for research among stakeholders and executives. It seems that the perception about research is that it's academic and slow. And if you remember the calendar I started with, some studies could be slow. Somebody's asking a question, and the fastest time for you to get an answer is within 3 weeks. It's definitely understandable when people think it's academic and slow. With continuous user research and the technique that I just described to you about consumption, it becomes very practical and very nimble and very fast. And it changes the perception among stakeholders and executives about research for the better. Here are some lessons learned after applying this. I can't remember how many companies, probably about 3. WeWork, Goldman, and Anywell. Yeah, so 3 companies so far. So how has research changed? I think I mentioned that a minute ago. Very quick answers. This is not something that researchers or their stakeholders were used to. We didn't completely switch to continuous research. There's still a need for traditional research in many cases. So it's actually a combination. It's another, as I started with, it's another technique in your toolkit or your toolbox. We made a point of understanding why. In many cases, I don't know if it's necessarily related to continuous research, but it came up somehow that we're doing higher quality research because we're making a point of understanding why. So it's not just we report that, we identified a certain behavior or a certain research participant said something. This is usually what you see in reports. It's of higher quality if you also bother to analyze the why. Why are they demonstrating this behavior? What is the psychological theory that you're basing this on? Or why did they say what they just said? Sometimes it's a matter of asking. Somebody's saying something or somebody is doing something. Sometimes it's not about any theory. Sometimes you just need to ask them, can you tell me more about why you chose this way rather than some other way or whatever it is? And then lastly, there's less need, as I mentioned, for new studies or for dedicated studies. Stakeholders have changed as well. We've seen that they use research, especially when we give them access to all of these insights. So they use research to shape product roadmaps. They are more empathetic to user needs, and I would say this is because it's not necessarily because it's continuous user research. It's because of the video. I would say the video evidence in the nuggets. Once people see their users either enjoying something they built or struggling with something they built, they become more empathetic than a researcher standing in a meeting room or a Zoom call telling them about it or them reading about it. And it seems that stakeholders also turn more for research. They really begin to understand what it can give them, and then they turn more to research. Doesn't necessarily mean we need to do new research, as I mentioned a minute ago, but definitely more interested in answers coming from research efforts. And lastly, the challenges that we've kind of struggled through the years when we introduced continuous research. First and foremost, researchers. Researchers are used to traditional ways. We've done this before. This is our craft, and so on and so forth. There are a lot of kind of things researchers think about this that make them not want to do continuous research. I would say the primary claim is that they lose the ability to synthesize, and they only provide small chunks of insights. I think this could be mitigated once you first you interview a person, you disassemble what you learned into nuggets, and then you reassemble that into new understandings and bigger insights. This is where your craft is really showing. So that's what I kind of answer to this challenge. There's definitely a challenge with internal kind of public relations for this approach, this system. Again, if researchers are used to traditional ways, stakeholders are even more used to traditional ways and are not willing to always gonna try something new, such as you find your own answers. Here's this system with insights. Go find what you're looking for, or go find the answers to the questions you need answers to. It's not always easy, not always working with everyone. And there's also, because it's a newer approach and people are not necessarily used to it, and it is a little bit different than traditional research, then I would say the quality of the research is sometimes affected or is challenged. And this is something you need to be very aware of, especially when there are several people doing research and kind of applying this approach in the same time. There is a challenge with the kind of consistency and alignment. All right, how would you get started? So I would say if you're a researcher in a company, whether you're alone or in a team of researchers or in a larger group of researchers, you already have the makings of applying continuous research even if you never did that before. So I would say the first thing you can do is come with a completely open mind and in an open-ended way to what you're trying to learn. It's not that you're not going to do any more traditional research or dedicated studies answering very specific questions, but when you come to continuous research, you don't really have goals in terms of the research. You don't really know what you're going to find. You're not really honed in on a specific topic. So come with an open mind, and I think most researchers are set up to do that by their nature and personality. And then they used to say with the lean startup that you should goob, get out of the building. I would say stay out of the building. I know it has become hard in the past 3 years, and we're all kind of Zoom monkeys these days. But I also heard that it's getting better in many places, and people are going back to being outside. And outside doesn't necessarily mean physically outside, but it's outside of your office, outside of your building. Keep doing that. Keep bringing those insights from people, from their environment. This is nothing new, but if you want to do continuous research, this is really less about, I would call it usability testing, and more about understanding people and what they need. And third, what you need to do, choose, build, create is distributed access to insights. So it's not just you, the researcher, or you, the researchers. It's access to anyone in the organization who's relevant for this, and it's more than designers, product managers, and engineers. Give access to everyone. The way to do that is not by writing a report. The way to do that is by using or applying these principles on a certain tool, or using a certain tool dedicated to it, where you can add and store all of your insights or nuggets and provide access to others to kind of reassemble their the topic of their insight, the topic of their interests based on those insights. And again, that brings me back to Amazon and their 11.6 seconds. I think you can also provide answers within every 11.6 seconds, and even less if you have that framework and that approach, and you use it and apply it. That is all I had to say. I'm happy to take questions. Before that, a shameless plug to my startup, anywell.com. We are helping companies deal with the struggles of hybrid work. So if you're working hybrid, or your company works hybrid, check out the website and see if we can help. As promised, first link here is the link to this deck, and some other links to materials that might be relevant and helpful, including a discount code hiding here for measuring user happiness. So take advantage of that. And with that, I'm happy to answer questions.
So Tomer, I'm going to do a bit of help here, because we got like so many questions.
Okay.
And what I'm going to do is I try to cluster them a little bit and throw these questions on the screen for you. You'll see the question. You can also read it from Tatiana. She's asking about WeWork. Yeah.
So with this WeWork example, how did you define when it was time to stop and take another topic for interviewing? It looks like over the time you collect an exhausting list of different reasons to leave WeWork. Yes. So we actually identified 70-something reasons for why people leave WeWork. I can't remember exactly, but I think the top 5 reasons were responsible to about 60% of churn. So we kind of took those 5 reasons and solved them. I don't think it was never time to stop. I mean, WeWork's offering was changing, as with, I'm going to go back to software now. Every software product is growing and changing. There's never a company that said, we released version 2 and that's it, we're done. So there's always more. So insights are also kind of alive and kicking, and there's always something to learn. The thing that did change a lot is what I showed earlier with the fourth question. So in my example there, it was a room booking system, but you can ask about things that the team is interested in anytime you want. I hope I answered.
Yes, thank you. There's another one from Tatiana, and a number of people are interested in this one, so I'm going to throw this again. I'm going, by the way, in order, like first come, first serve, and then this one is about, you see, like traditional versus continuous, how to decide which one to pick for the topic.
So I think there's always room for both. So the question is about how do you define which research goes to traditional approach and which one goes to continuous approach. So I would say first there's room for both. I think they're trying to do different things. Traditional research, as I said, will answer very specific questions in a very deep way, in a very thorough way. You have the opportunity to ask, if we are interested in coffee, then you have the opportunity to talk with somebody for 45 minutes about coffee. With continuous research, it's not like that. So again, with traditional research, I want to kind of, in a way, lock them into answering the questions I'm interested in. Of course, I'm interested. If other answers come in, if other topics come in, I'll listen. But my main focus is what I agreed with my team that we need to answer, the knowledge gap we need to fill in a way. Continuous research is for something that is, again, high level. So if you take my WeWork example and apply it to any product and ask, why are you using this product? What works well? What doesn't work so well? If you do that every day, with one user, in a year, you and your company will be very smart. So I think they have different goals. And the primary difference is kind of the level of specificity. So I would say traditional, very specific, and continuous is very high level.
Cool, thanks a lot. We have a number of questions about recruiting participants. I'm going to put one of them here. And there's a side question to that from Domi. In a B2B context, how does this differ what you described in a B2B context to recruit constantly participants?
Recruiting. Okay, so first I will say recruitment of participants is the biggest bottleneck of research. It's the biggest challenge. It's the thing that delays all studies. And it is a pain for many people and many companies, especially if the researcher is doing that themselves rather than having a research ops person. Not all researchers and companies can afford that. So it's hard and it's painful. And I would definitely call it a problem. I agree with the selection of words here. I have an article I published on Medium with 43 ways for finding participants for research. You need to be creative. I would say the key recommendation or tip here, and this is valid for B2B or not, is to recruit, not wait for when you need participants, but recruit generally and then recruit specifically. So recruit people to participate in your research. I think example I have for that is at Google we had a page. I think I would argue it still exists. I'm almost tempted to try it out now. .com/usability at the time. Let's see. Yeah. So I know. Can you see my screen? No, you can't see that.
We can see the presentation.
Yeah, let me stop that and share this. So you can start a page online. So I just typed google.com/usability. I see it changed the userresearch.google.com. So this is Google recruiting all the time, recruiting participants. Okay. People sign up, answer a bunch of questions, and then they're in the pool. Once there's a study, you can go to the pool, look for people kind of based on the answers they provided in this questionnaire that I'm sure exists here behind this link or button. Yeah. And then the researcher or whoever can search through the list of users based on their criteria and reach out to these and say, hey, remember you agreed to participate in research? We have one coming up in 2 weeks. So that's I would say is the biggest tip. You would need to be creative in terms of how you get there. With the B2B, I would say the main difference is that in many cases you can't pay participants. Their company is not going to be very comfortable with them paying a salary and you paying on top of that to their employees. So be mindful of that. The way to recruit within companies is to do that centrally. So have somebody, your point of contact in that company, help you maybe get a few participants sign up to the pool that I mentioned earlier, and do it this way. You can pay people with non-monetary incentives. And again, you can be creative here. T-shirt, Hall of Fame, kind of Hall of Fame page on your website where you put their names. You have no idea how much people love their name, so use that. I don't know. Give them cookies, buy them lunch, things that don't feel like money are gonna get more kind of buy-in from companies you recruit participants from. And it's also the way you position it with B2B is to, help us give you better service by giving us feedback. So that's always something that you can, a flag you can wave for people to be more attracted to it.
Cool. Thanks a lot. I have another question. This is more of a historical one. Like, how did you come up with this idea of continuous research in the first place?
I have no idea, but I think it's I think it started with these thoughts started at Google at the time. So I was with Google between 2008 and 2015. So somewhere there. It was mostly about not losing insights and kind of the bad memory problem. When at Google, unfortunately, I couldn't persuade people to do something about it. Google at the time, again, I have no idea how it is today, but at the time you couldn't go to one important person, persuade them, and they would instruct everybody to do something. Just didn't work that way. You needed to persuade a lot of people, and I was just not able to persuade a lot of people. Kind of going back to researchers, kind of not willing to change their traditional ways and things like that. So I think it only became practical when I started at WeWork at the time, immediately after Google, and then I can't remember how the idea came up, but I know it was there. At least
Awesome.
we implemented it there. Yeah.
I'm putting another question, interesting angle from early stage startups. No researcher team yet. How do you do all that you described, which is so like essential and valuable? But how do you do that without a researcher team?
So I would say that's the hard part. That's why I'm hesitating. Can I get trained? So with me and my startup, it's not fair because they have me. But get trained either by, I don't know, reading something, trying something out, taking a short course. I mean, there's no lack of materials, training materials out there. Get trained on how to ask questions. I know it sounds strange, but because we all ask questions all the time, but asking questions as a part of research is extremely critical to do right or not to do wrong. And once you have that, decide on several people who are going to do that. I would say, in my experience, let's say people who are completely unrelated to research, maybe about 10% of them will be interested in doing that, and they'll be kind of attracted even to do that well. So these are the people you should kind of train and just start a schedule. And I would do that in pairs, one person, because researchers are experienced and they can do a lot of things at the same time. When you're doing something rarely, then it's best that you have some help. So I would say do it in pairs of kind of interviewer, note taker, and yeah, start slow. If you can record, that's best, and you can get better training if you watch yourself, if you can bear it. Watch yourself, see how to get better. Sometimes you'll see, and it still happens to me to the day, no matter how many years of experience doing that. I ask biased questions, but you only notice that after the fact. So watching yourself on video will help as well.
Awesome, thank you. I'm gonna take a couple of more questions and then wrap up. I see one here from Kendall, a longer one. I'll let you read through.
Yeah, so the question is about, so the argument there is that it's not just continuous research, it's also continuous data collection without a research question. I agree. Do you find that this type of research leans more qualitative than traditional research in order to cast a wider net? I would say, yeah. It's mostly qualitative. When you're doing quantitative research, you don't know what the answers are going to be, but you know exactly what you're looking for. You need to be very, very specific. So, yes, I would say it tends more to the qualitative side. Some would argue what I presented earlier with the tour and the coffee, 72 versus 3 insights, is going to turning quantitative into qualitative. Not really. I think the more important things there are, if you remember when I mentioned understanding why, and focusing on one insight at a time and then reassembling things. These are the more important aspects of this approach.
Cool. Thanks a lot. I'm browsing through the question. There was one from Tobias, which I'm going to put it up here. My assumption is that he asked it as you were responding to one of the questions. I think it was in the B2B recruitment part.
I'm not sure I understand, but
he's saying that would this approach work as a free text survey? You need the continuous research. Thanks, Tobias, for the clarification.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of. I mean, I am a big fan of surveys, but done right. So, and a survey is something that has a lot of limitations, and especially in the hands of people who are not experienced in surveys. It's not dangerous. It's just that you're not going to get the answers you're looking for, and you wouldn't even know it. So I would say, even for the reason you're asking about, follow-up questions, you can ask in a survey, why are you leaving? and the person would respond and say, if it's in writing in a survey, they would say dogs. So you from here on, you can only guess what the problem was, but you'll never know. If you're in a conversation and you're talking to the person, then obviously you can ask what do you mean, or tell me more, or the backstory behind dogs and the reason you're leaving.
Thanks a lot. I'm going to take a very last one. It's about
No
research repositories. Do you have a favorite one, something that you like?
Yeah, we always get to the tools. I think the tool is the least important thing here. Find something that works. You can twist the arm of many existing tools. You don't need a dedicated tool. I find it hard to recommend because I didn't use all the tools. I used just a few. What I do today, by the way, is I configured Monday.com that we use for task management and project management. I kind of twisted its arm to doing, to being this is the research system. It works pretty well for us. And I have to admit that I am not very updated on the progress of, let's call them the usual suspects in terms of repositories. So I find it hard to recommend. But I don't think the tool is the challenge here. I think the challenge is everything I described earlier. And you can find a tool that works for you, even if it's not dedicated to or developed for or developed as a research repository. You can use, I don't know, Airtable and Excel or Google Spreadsheets. You can use them for that as well if you want to.
Yeah, and just as a side note, I would also add that the research ops community has a very nice. It used to have this Airtable where you can filter through and see all the available tools that can be used as a research repo. I know it's not a recommendation, but at least it gives you an overview of what are the options out there.
Yeah, and I'm apologies that I can't say this, but I really can't. I don't.
It also depends on the use case.
There are probably 20 tools, and I used maybe 2, so I guess it's not fair.
Yeah, thanks, Tatiana. She posted the link to that. With that, let's wrap up. Tomer, thanks so much for joining us. It was a pleasure. The presentation as well as the Q&A. Really appreciate you came by, and thanks again.
Sure thing. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Akos.
Take care, everyone. See you later.